Before we dive in, don't forget, if you love epic sci-fi stories about humanity standing toe-to-toe with the galaxy's deadliest challenges, hit that like button, drop a comment with your favorite HFY moment, and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Now let's begin. The jungle did not breathe, it prowled. Every branch, every vine, every shadow seemed alive with malice. The planet had earned its ban. No colony, no settlement, no outpost lasted more than a few days before something tore it apart. The council called the beast that roamed here the apex predator, an animal so feared that hunters spoke its name with clenched jaws and lowered voices. Entire armored divisions had been swallowed by its rage, and now the finest alien hunters had been dispatched once more to cage the legend or die, proving it couldn't be done. Lieutenant Cale Danner knew none of this mattered. What mattered was that his shuttle was gone, his team scattered, and his survival pack barely half full. He had trained for harsh environments, deserts, frozen tundra, irradiated wastelands, but nothing had prepared him for the oppressive silence of this jungle, a silence broken only by distant roars that made the canopy quake. He pressed his palm to the pulse rifle slung against his chest and pushed forward, each step a measured decision between life and death. Sweat slid down his temple, cutting through grime. He forced his breathing steady. Panic killed faster than claws. He remembered the drill instructor's voice, "A scout who panics becomes part of the soil." That line had stuck. It reminded him to listen, to watch, to measure. The first time he saw it, he thought the jungle itself had moved. Branches cracked, a shadow unfurled, and a pair of eyes glowed amber in the half-light. They fixed on him with a weight that made his muscles twitch with the urge to run. The predator stood taller than armored walkers, its body sheathed in scales that rippled like living armor. Muscles shifted beneath, coils of strength so absolute that Cale wondered if the very ground bent under its weight. He did not raise his rifle. He knew somehow that to do so was to die. Instead, he lowered himself to one knee, keeping his eyes level, heart hammering against his ribs. The air between them thickened with a predator's curiosity. The beast's nostrils flared. It rumbled, a sound not quite a growl, not quite a warning. Cale clenched his jaw. He whispered, "If you're going to kill me, do it quick." His voice was steady, though his insides screamed. But it didn't. It leaned closer, its massive head lowering until its breath warmed his skin. The hot exhale reeked of blood and earth. The jaws that could shear steel shifted slightly, opening, closing, testing. Then it turned away. A swipe of its tail toppled a tree as if it were grass, yet the motion was measured, deliberate. Cale exhaled in disbelief. His training screamed at him to move, to retreat, to put distance between himself and death, yet he didn't. Something in its eyes, intelligence, calculation, held him rooted. The predator walked a few paces away, then stopped. Its head swung back toward him as if ensuring he followed. He swallowed, wiped sweat from his brow, and forced his boots to move. Step by step, through the twisted roots and hanging vines, he trailed it. A mad thought grew in his mind. The apex predator wanted him alive. Night descended quickly on the jungle. Without warning, the cacophony of insects ceased. Cale built a small fire, careful to keep the smoke low. He chewed on a ration bar, tasteless and dry, and listened. From the shadows beyond the flames, amber eyes gleamed again. The predator had returned, watching silently. He could not sleep. Not with that thing so close. His pulse rifle rested across his knees, finger hovering near the trigger but never touching it. Hours crawled by. At some point, he realized the predator had lain down, its massive body coiled against the ground like a fortress of scale and sinew. Its breathing slowed, steady and unthreatening. It was asleep. Cale's throat went dry. He stared across the fire at the monster the galaxy feared, the beast that had ended fleets, hunters, and colonies. And it was sleeping, sleeping within striking distance of him. The absurdity nearly made him laugh. He clamped his teeth together to keep sound from escaping. In that silence, a new thought stirred in him, dangerous and impossible. Maybe the legends were wrong. Maybe it was not the predator that chose chaos, but the galaxy that never offered it anything else. The jungle hissed again, a distant roar answering somewhere in the dark, and Cale tightened his grip on the rifle. The council's hunters were surely inbound, armed with technology and arrogance enough to rattle the stars. He knew they would come. He also knew the apex predator at his side would not run when they did. Cale lay back against the roots of a tree, exhaustion claiming him despite fear. His last thought before drifting into shallow sleep was not of survival rations, not of extraction beacons, not of the hunters that would scour the jungle. It was of amber eyes watching him not with hunger, but with something far stranger. When dawn broke, the fire was ash, the jungle alive again. Kale woke to find the predator still there, its body sprawled, scales glinting in shafts of sunlight piercing the canopy. For a moment, it looked peaceful, almost noble, like an ancient guardian rather than a terror. The spell shattered when the predator's ears twitched, head lifting sharply, eyes narrowing at some sound beyond Kale's hearing. It stood with fluid power, muscles rippling, tail lashing once. Kale pushed himself upright, heart racing. He didn't know if the sound meant prey, threat, or both, but he understood one thing with sudden clarity. He was no longer alone. And somewhere in the distance the hunters were already coming. Kale had learned long ago that survival hinged not on strength but on rhythm. The jungle's rhythm was alien, a pulse of life where silence meant danger and noise meant comfort. Days bled into one another with punishing heat by morning, choking humidity by midday, and storms that swept through with bone-rattling fury by nightfall. Each cycle taught him more about the beast that shadowed him. It never left his side, though it did not always walk with him. Sometimes it vanished into the undergrowth, the faint tremor of its weight the only sign it still lingered. Other times it stalked visibly, towering behind him like a mountain of muscle and scale, as though daring the world to approach. Kale tested his boundaries carefully, speaking in low tones when the silence pressed too heavy, watching its responses. It did not speak in words, but in tilts of its head, in low rumbles, in the way its tail swept or its shoulders shifted. One morning while he searched for water along a stream bed, a hiss sliced through the air. A creature coiled from beneath the reeds, its mandibles dripping venom. It lunged, striking with blinding speed. Kale's reflexes carried him sideways but not fast enough. Fangs grazed his arm, burning like fire. He cried out, staggering back. Before the creature could strike again, the predator was there. It hit the attacker with bone-breaking force, a blur of claws and teeth. Scales split, mandibles shattered, and the jungle floor shook with the violence of the kill. Kale fell to his knees, clutching his wound as the venom scorched through his veins. His breaths came shallow, the edges of the world dimming. Through the haze, he felt a shadow loom over him. The predator lowered its head, nostrils flaring at his wound. It rumbled low, a sound Kale felt in his chest. He expected death, a merciful end to the agony. Instead, the beast turned, tore flesh from the carcass of the slain creature, and dropped it beside him. Kale stared, half delirious. He understood. It was offering food, offering strength. With trembling hands, he forced himself to chew, to swallow, to keep the fire of life alight. Hours passed in a blur of fever and half-conscious whispers. The predator remained, still as stone, eyes fixed outward, guarding him. When Kale finally woke in the damp of evening, the fever breaking, he found the beast lying near him. Its flank rose and fell with slow, deliberate breaths. He reached out without thinking, palm brushing against scaled hide. Warmth radiated from it, steady and grounding. The predator did not flinch. Something had changed. From that day the rhythm between them altered. The predator no longer watched him like prey or tolerated him like a shadow. It moved with him. It shared kills, dragging down massive beasts that would have taken Kale days to hunt alone. It allowed him to sleep without fear, its massive body curled nearby, its senses sharper than any alarm. At night, as storms ripped through the canopy, Kale found himself pressed against the predator's side, its heat shielding him from the cold. Yet trust was not absolute. The beast bristled at sudden movements. Its gaze could still harden, a reminder that its mercy was not weakness but choice. Kale respected that line. He learned to read it, to move with patience, to treat every moment as negotiation. Beyond the bond forming between them, another rhythm intruded. Machinery. Faint at first, like thunder far away but growing clearer each day. Kale's gut twisted. He knew what it was. Hunters. The galaxy's elite trackers had landed. He caught glimpses of their craft streaking above the treeline, heard the metallic shrieks of drones. Their arrogance rang in every sound, their movements heavy with certainty that no human and no beast could stand in their way. One evening, as Kale cleaned his blade by firelight, the predator stirred. Its head snapped toward the horizon, ears angled, nostrils flaring. A growl vibrated from its chest, low and primal. Kale did not need words. Something was near. He rose, gripping his rifle, scanning the treeline. For long minutes nothing came. Then from the shadows a drone emerged, gliding silent, eyes glowing cold. It locked onto Kale. He cursed under his breath, raising his weapon. The shot cracked through the night, shredding the machine, sparks scattering across the ground. The predator lunged immediately after, swiping the wreckage into the jungle as if erasing proof of Kale's presence. Its eyes glowed fiercely in the firelight as it turned to him, as if recognizing that they now faced more than venomous beasts and storms. Kale exhaled, grim recognition settling in. The hunters would know now. They would come. The predator circled the fire, restless, growling toward the dark as though daring the world to challenge them. Kale sat against the roots of a tree, cleaning his rifle with deliberate calm, though his chest burned with unease. He glanced at the beast, and for the first time he did not see an enemy, not even a guardian, but a partner. He thought of Earth's history, wolves that once tore men apart but later ran beside them, horses that once bucked and trampled yet learned to carry riders across continents. Humanity had always found kinship where others found only fear. Perhaps this was their nature. Perhaps this was why he still lived. A storm broke again that night, the sky cracking open, rain hammering down in sheets. Kale built no fire, knowing light would draw enemies. Instead, he lay beneath the predator's great frame, its scales gleaming wet beneath flashes of lightning. Thunder shook the ground, but he felt strangely calm, cocooned within the shelter of something that had once symbolized death itself. The predator lowered its head close to him, eyes half-lidded, breath steady. For the second time since he'd been stranded, it closed its eyes and slept. Kale stared at it, rain dripping down his face, heart steady despite the storm. Out there in the jungle, the hunters prowled, armed with weapons and arrogance. They would not understand what he now understood. They would see only a prize to cage or a monster to kill. But the predator had chosen to rest beside him. Kale closed his eyes, exhaustion dragging him under. When he slept, he did so not as prey-fearing claws, but as a man beside a guardian that had become more than legend. When dawn came, the storm had passed, but tracks scarred the ground beyond their clearing, alien boots, heavy and precise, proof that the hunters had drawn closer during the night. Kale studied them with clenched fists. The council's finest were here, their net tightening. The predator prowled the perimeter, tail lashing, its growl rumbling low. It knew as well as he did that the days of quiet survival were over. The hunters would strike soon, and when they did, blood would follow. Kale tightened the strap of his rifle, gaze steady on the horizon. He no longer thought only of surviving until rescue. He thought of standing his ground beside the predator that had spared him, fed him, and guarded him through storms. The galaxy's hunters were closing in, and Kale felt the shape of the coming war. He would not face it alone. The jungle awakened with tension. Birds erupted from the canopy, their shrieks scattering like shards of glass through the humid air. Kale froze, hand resting on the grip of his rifle, listening. The predator halted beside him, its immense head lifting, nostrils flaring. A low growl rippled through its chest. Something was coming, and it wasn't the storm that brewed on the horizon. The first hunter revealed himself not with footsteps but with machines. Drones slid through the trees, spherical and silent, their lenses glimmering red. They swept beams of light across the undergrowth, scanning, recording. Behind them, armored figures stepped into view, their weapons glowing with cold precision. The hunters were nothing like Kale's ragtag platoon had been. They moved with discipline born of arrogance, confident in technology and centuries of conquest. One of them spotted the fire pit Kale had abandoned at dawn. He heard the alien bark orders in a language rough with clicks and snaps. The hunters fanned out, their movements crisp, their weapons raised. Kale crouched low behind a tangle of roots, pulse hammering in his ears. The predator crouched beside him, every muscle coiled, its amber eyes fixed on the intruders. The hunters set their trap with mechanical efficiency. Sonic emitters were planted in a crescent, their pitch tuned to mimic prey cries. Drones shimmered into cloaked positions overhead, weaving a lattice of energy beams too fine for Kale to see but enough to pin even the largest beast in place. They knew what they hunted. They thought they had accounted for everything. Kale whispered under his breath, "Don't take the bait." The predator ignored him. With a snarl that made the ground vibrate, it surged into the clearing. The sonic lure had done its job. Nets of hard light snapped around its form, searing against scales. The predator roared, thrashing, claws tearing trenches into the earth. The hunters tightened their formation, weapons firing bursts of energy that scorched hide and split trees. Kale's instincts screamed at him to stay hidden, to let the galaxy's finest destroy themselves against the monster. But he knew what that would mean. The predator's fury could level the jungle, and he would be caught in the wreckage. More than that, something inside him rebelled at the thought of leaving the creature to die caged like an animal. He moved. Sliding from cover, Kale sprinted low and fast, weaving through fire and chaos. He spotted the emitters staked into the ground, their cores glowing as they fed power to the net. He skidded to one, ripped it free and smashed it against a rock until it sparked and died. The net shimmered, weakening. The predator lunged, snapping one filament, then another. Its roar tore through the clearing, shaking leaves from the canopy. Hunters shouted, recalibrating their weapons, but Kale was already on the next emitter, ripping cables apart with desperate strength. The predator broke free in a storm of violence. Claws like sabers ripped through machines, shredding drones into sparks. Hunters scattered, some leaping clear, others crushed under the weight of a tail that snapped bone as easily as branches. Energy bolts hammered the beast, but rage drove it forward, unstoppable. Kale ducked behind a fallen trunk as a blast scorched the earth where he'd stood. He fired back, his rifle's bark sharp and defiant, not to kill but to disrupt. He knew he couldn't match their technology, but he didn't have to. All he needed was to break their rhythm, to give the predator room. One hunter, towering and insectoid, advanced on him with a cruel grin. The alien leveled a weapon that hummed with energy, a killing stroke meant to erase a human from existence. Kale threw himself sideways, firing as he fell. His shot pierced the hunter's wrist, the weapon clattering away. The predator was on the alien before it could recover, jaws snapping shut with bone-crushing finality. The clearing dissolved into chaos. Hunters fired wildly, their formation broken, their arrogance unraveling in the face of raw power. The predator ripped apart a mechanized exosuit, hurling the wreckage into two more aliens. Drones buzzed frantically, their beams failing to restrain the creature as Kale disabled emitter after emitter with ruthless efficiency. Then something happened none of them expected. In the middle of its rampage, the predator stopped. Its claws dripped with blood, its chest heaved with fury, its eyes burned with primal rage. But when Kale shouted its name, he didn't even realize he had given it one until the word left his mouth. It turned. It turned and it listened. The predator's gaze locked on him. For a heartbeat, everything froze. Hunters, drones, even Kale himself seemed caught in the impossible stillness. Then the beast lowered its head, snarling once before stepping back from the carnage. It obeyed. The hunters stared, disbelief etched into every motion. One muttered something frantic into his comms, no doubt transmitting the impossible sight back to the council. A human, a fragile scout from a backwater planet, commanding the galaxy's deadliest predator with nothing but his voice. The surviving hunters retreated in disarray, dragging their wounded, abandoning their dead. Their drones flickered out one by one, vanishing into the canopy. Within minutes, the jungle reclaimed its silence. Kale stood in the wreckage, chest heaving, rifle trembling in his hands. The predator moved to his side, brushing past him with a rumble that was almost calm. Its body bore burns and cuts, but its spirit was unbroken. It lowered itself to the ground, massive head bowing beside him as though acknowledging what had passed between them. Kale swallowed hard, adrenaline still roaring through his veins. He looked at the beast and saw not a monster, not a legend, but something greater. A choice. Above them, somewhere far beyond the canopy, alien eyes watched. The council would not let this stand. Word of what had happened here would ripple through the stars, igniting fear, outrage, and questions no one wanted answered. Kale knew they had won only the first battle. The true war was coming. The predator shifted closer, its flank brushing against his leg, a silent vow written in flesh and blood. Kale tightened his grip on the rifle and stared into the jungle, already hearing the faint hum of distant engines. The hunters would return. And next time they would not come unprepared. The chamber of the Galactic Council was built for grandeur, a cathedral of politics where towering spires and crystalline walls projected an illusion of control. Tonight, however, the chamber pulsed with unease. Footage replayed across hovering holoscreens. A human scout, filthy and bloodied, standing amid shattered drones and broken hunters, while the apex predator, the nightmare of empires, stood at his side, calm and obedient. The silence in the room was broken only by the predator's roar echoing from the recording before it faded into the still image of its massive frame bowed near Kale Danner. "Impossible," hissed one delegate, his scaled arms trembling. "That creature has no master, no pack, no mercy. And yet, look." Another slammed a clawed fist onto the table. "This is human trickery. Manipulation. Their species thrives on subversion. We should capture this Kale Danner, dissect his methods, and neutralize whatever sorcery binds the beast." A softer voice, layered with fear, countered, "Or perhaps the predator chose him. If so, then humanity wields a gift more dangerous than weapons." The chamber fractured into chaos. Some called for Kale's immediate arrest, others for the extermination of the predator's entire species, and a few whispered of alliances that might tilt the balance of galactic power. What none admitted aloud was the truth gnawing at them all. Their fleets had failed, their hunters had fled, and a single human had done what the galaxy's greatest powers could not. Far below the orbiting council stations, Kale and the predator walked through a jungle soaked in tension. The beast carried scars from the hunter's ambush, burns seared into its scales, but its stride was unbroken. Kale kept pace, eyes sharp, senses tuned to every shift of leaf and shadow. He felt the council's gaze even from here, an invisible pressure pressing down. He thought of wolves tamed by firelight, of horses bridled by patience, of dogs that learned to guard children rather than devour them. Humanity had always found a way to bridge the gap between predator and partner. Perhaps this was simply their nature written larger, echoing across the stars. That night, he dreamt of Earth, not the concrete spires of its cities, but the wilderness. Forests where wolves had first circled campfires, plains where horses thundered beneath the first riders. He woke with dawn's light filtering through the canopy to find the predator standing sentinel above him, amber eyes reflecting the sunrise. It rumbled low, not a warning but a presence, as though telling him the bond was no dream. The reprieve ended with the shriek of engines. Dropships cut through the sky, their hulls bearing the insignia of the Council's strike forces. Kale cursed, pulling his rifle tight to his chest. The predator snarled, tail lashing, body coiling with restrained fury. Troops descended in formation, their armor gleaming, their weapons humming with lethal promise. They moved not like hunters but like an execution squad. Their commander raised a voice amplifier, broadcasting across the clearing. Kale Danner of Earth. By decree of the Galactic Council, you are ordered to surrender for questioning. The beast will be neutralized. Kale spat into the dirt. You'll get neither. At his side, the predator growled, the ground vibrating beneath its weight. The strike team advanced. Energy nets deployed again, this time stronger, reinforced by overlapping fields. Drones fanned out, layering signals to disorient. But Kale was ready. He had mapped their rhythms in his mind during the first ambush. He had the jungle, the beast, and desperation. The battle erupted in chaos. Kale struck first, using a smoke charge to blind the drones. Shots cracked through the mist, but he was already moving, diving into roots and brush. The predator surged forward like a thunderclap, tearing through lines, scattering armored soldiers like dolls. Kale used misdirection, traps fashioned from vines, pits camouflaged with foliage, sharpened stakes driven into the ground. Strike soldiers stumbled into them, slowed, separated. He fired with precision, not to kill but to cripple, breaking formation piece by piece. Through it all, the predator fought with terrifying grace. Its claws ripped through mechs, its jaws shattered reinforced plating. Yet when Kale's voice cut through the din, sharp commands, warnings, guidance, it listened. It shifted, redirected, obeyed. What had once been fury without aim had become a blade sharpened by partnership. Minutes stretched into eternity. Smoke cleared to reveal broken machines, unconscious soldiers, and silence heavy as stone. The strike force lay defeated, scattered at the predator's feet. Kale stood panting, rifle low, sweat stinging his eyes. From the treeline, a surviving soldier staggered backward, broadcasting frantic transmissions. The beast, it fights with him. It protects him. We cannot subdue it. We cannot subdue them. Then he fled into the jungle, leaving only fear in his wake. The predator lowered itself beside Kale, scales streaked with burns and blood. It bowed its massive head, pressing briefly against his shoulder, a gesture heavy with meaning. Kale exhaled, his chest tight with both relief and grim certainty. The council would see this. They would hear the panic in their soldier's voice, they would analyze every detail, and they would understand. The predator was not uncontrollable. It had chosen a human. In the council chamber, the revelation sent shockwaves. One delegate whispered, "If humans can turn predators into allies, what else can they bend?" Another snarled, "They are a contagion. They infect loyalty twisted to their cause. If we do not act now, the galaxy will belong to them." The decision came swift and merciless. A fleet would be dispatched not to capture but to cleanse. The jungle would be burned from orbit, and with it the predator and the human who had shattered the galaxy's illusion of dominance. Kale knew nothing of the decree yet, but he felt the storm building. He saw it in the way the predator prowled the perimeter at dusk, restless, uneasy. He felt it in his own bones, a certainty that their fragile reprieve would not last. He sat by the fire that night, staring into the flames. "They won't stop," he whispered. The predator shifted closer, its body curling around him like living armor. He reached out, resting his hand on the ridge of its skull. Then neither will we. The jungle quieted as if holding its breath. Somewhere above the canopy, warships gathered. Somewhere deep within the council, fear solidified into resolve. The galaxy's most feared predator had found its equal in a human, and the powers of the stars would rather raise a world than let that truth spread. Kale lay back against the predator's flank, staring at the canopy. Sleep tugged at him, but his hand never left its scales. He felt the slow rise and fall of its breathing, steady, loyal. The war had not yet begun, but both of them were already committed. The fire crackled. The predator rumbled softly. And high above, fleets prepared to fall like hammers. The battle raged across the clearing as if the forest itself had been split in two by fire and rage. Drones screamed overhead, their plasma bolts cutting through trees like paper, while squads of armored hunters poured through the underbrush in disciplined waves. The apex roared, a sound that split marrow and bent resolve, and with that roar it leapt. Claws caught the first mech, ripping through alloy like it were nothing more than brittle bark. Sparks burst, the machine shuddered, then collapsed into ruin. The hunters had come with confidence, bred from centuries of taming wild planets, but the sight of their armored unit torn in half by living muscle and bone sent hesitation rippling through their lines. Kalen stood at the center of it all, his rifle barking light and fury. His shots were precise, but they were only a whisper beside the hurricane unleashed by the apex. The beast fought not as a blind engine of destruction but as if it understood strategy, moving to intercept drones before they could flank Kalen, smashing apart squads before they could converge. Each strike seemed calculated, and Kalen realized with awe that the creature wasn't merely fighting, it was protecting him. Soren barked commands through comms, his veterans comm holding the smaller unit of scouts together. They struck from the trees, harassing hunters who dared close in, keeping pressure off Kalen while the apex carved the battlefield. But Soren's voice, usually steady, carried a tremor. He had never seen such power channeled so directly, so loyally toward a single man. Hunters adjusted tactics. Smoke flooded the clearing, sensors guided their movements, nets of crackling energy fired to ensnare. For a moment it seemed they might gain the upper hand, until the apex caught one of the nets in its jaws, shredded it, and flung it back with enough force to coil around its wielder. The hunter screamed as the energy turned on him. Kalen pressed forward, his rifle barrel scorching as he laid suppressive fire, the apex circling with him as though the two were parts of one living weapon. The hunter's commander appeared in the haze, clad in obsidian armor and wielding a spear tipped with searing plasma. His presence silenced his troops and he pointed the spear at Kalen. "You are nothing but prey dressed as soldier," he snarled, voice amplified. "The predator belongs to us. Step aside or die." The apex's eyes flared. Muscles bunched, claws dug into the dirt, but it did not leap. It turned instead to Kalen, awaiting his decision, like a soldier awaiting command. That moment froze everyone. The hunters, Soren, even Kalen himself, as the universe acknowledged that the deadliest predator known to countless species deferred to a human scout. Kalen lifted his rifle, steady despite the tremor in his chest. "It belongs to no one," he said. "But it fights beside me. And that makes you the prey." The apex roared and surged forward. The commander met it head-on, spear blazing, each strike hurling sparks as metal clashed against bone and claw. Kalen dashed in tandem, firing bursts that forced the hunters back, cutting off their support. Soren and the scouts exploited the chaos, their ambushes surgically precise, felling stragglers before they could regroup. The duel between beast and commander reached its peak when the spear thrust deep, grazing the apex's shoulder, searing fur and flesh. The creature's roar shook trees from their roots, yet it did not falter. Instead, it twisted, slammed its bulk into the commander, and drove him into the ground with bone-crushing force. Kalen leapt in, rifle aimed directly at the commander's visor. His finger tightened, but he hesitated, seeing the man pinned, broken but still alive. "Do it!" shouted Soren from the treeline. Kalen's mind raced. To kill him would end the threat, but in the apex's steady eyes, Kalen saw expectation, not of death but of choice. The beast had shown restraint, protecting, fighting with precision. To slaughter now would mean becoming like the hunters who sought only to dominate. Kalen lowered the rifle. "Leave," he said coldly, "and tell your council what you saw. Tell them who truly stands with the apex." The commander spat blood, fury blazing in his eyes, but fear tempered it. With a signal, his remaining troops retreated, dragging him with them. The forest fell quiet, save for the labored breaths of Kalen, the rumble of the apex and the sigh of wind through broken trees. Soren approached slowly, disbelief etched into every line of his face. You spared him. After what they tried. Kalen nodded, wiping grime and sweat from his brow. Killing him would have proved their point, that strength is about domination. That's not what this is. This? He glanced at the apex, whose massive head lowered beside him, warm breath washing over his shoulder. This is about loyalty. Trust. Something they'll never understand. The scouts emerged, their eyes wide as they looked from man to beast. Where there had once been fear, there was now reverence, as if they'd witnessed something greater than survival, a bond that defied logic, hierarchy, and species. The apex lowered itself into the dirt, curling massive limbs as if exhaustion finally claimed it. Yet it kept one amber eye open, focused on Kalen. Without hesitation, Kalen stepped closer and placed a hand on its fur, feeling heat and heartbeat beneath. The predator rumbled softly, not the roar of battle but the purr of peace. In that moment, Kalen realized the galaxy would never see them the same again. Word would spread, the hunters would make sure of it, and when it did, entire civilizations would have to reckon with the truth. The deadliest predator in existence had chosen to stand with a human. Soren broke the silence. You know this means they'll come back. Stronger. With more than just hunters. Kalen nodded, his hand still resting on the apex. Then let them. They think they've seen everything. They haven't seen what happens when trust makes predators into allies. The forest was scarred, the night alive with the smell of ozone and blood, but within the wreckage there was also an unshakable certainty. Where others saw a beast, Kalen had seen a companion. Where others sought control, he had found kinship. And in that choice, a new legend was born, one that would ripple through councils and empires, whispered with awe and fear alike. Hunters had come for the apex. They had found instead a bond they could never break, a truth more dangerous than claws or plasma. And somewhere deep within its chest, the beast that had toppled war machines and scattered armies rumbled like distant thunder, not in rage but in contentment, as it closed its eyes and slept calmly beside the human scout.